Premed office hours 169. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your moderator for the day. I am the founder of Medical School HQ, co-founder at Mapped, author of the Premed Playbook, guidebook series, or series of books, however you want to say that. Yeah. And we're putting on MappedCon in a couple weeks, and we expect to see you there. I'm joined by Verinia Granum, former assistant dean of pre-health and STEM advising at Hofstra University. How you doing, Verinia?
I'm doing great, thanks. Can you hear me okay? My mic is cutting in and out. Awesome. Yeah, that's a mouthful, I know. Looking forward to MapCon. I really am. I'm excited to see our students. Hopefully get to meet and connect with them there. Yeah, come check it out. Lots of medical schools will be there. Very exciting.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. All right. We also have Courtney Lewis, my mouse is jumping all over. That's super weird. Former director of admissions at Burrell College of Osteopathic Medicine. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah.
Another gray day in Seattle.
Gray or great?
Gray with an E.
It almost looks like it's
or an
snowing.
A.
Or an A. Yeah, it does. It's just that misty drizzle.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
That just means there's sadness in the air. That's Seattle for you. Awesome. Well, MapsCon, I mentioned it once. We're going to keep mentioning it during the rest of the hour as well. October 6th through 8th. We are just over 2 weeks away from our first in-person event. Tickets. You can get them half off right now. I don't know if we have. Let me see if we have a coupon code set up. I was playing with coupon codes earlier. Of course, my keyboard's not working now.
Yeah, for anybody who's traveling, make sure that you look at the hotel on the actual event website, because then you get discounts instead of looking at it on like Hotwire or travel.com or whatever you kids are using these days, Expedia. So different prices there. You can find people to kind of split costs with. If you are going by your lonesome, we will have ways to meet other individuals so you won't feel alone the whole time. But come and meet our deans and director friends that are going to be there and learn some things.
Yes. All right. I'm making a 50% off coupon right now called Office Hours. Go use that for 50% off of your ticket. Right now. Go do that. All right. So if you are new here, we answer your questions on this show live. If you're on Instagram, head over to premed.tv and ask your questions over on our YouTube channel. That's where we pull them from. So let's rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
Christian asks, let me zoom in a little bit so I can actually see the question. Boop. There we go. Christian asks, next semester I will have OChem 2 with lab, Physics 2 lab, I'm assuming with lab, or just Physics 2 lab, and Biochem no lab, while also studying for the MCAT. I'm thinking of self-studying Biochem to ease the load. Thoughts?
What's
strong reaction, Courtney?
What's the rush?
Yeah.
That's
take the MCAT so we can apply next cycle.
I know. I don't know about this one. I think, can it be done? Yes. Is it risky? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot on your plate. That's a lot to have to do on top of each other. This is foundational coursework that you're definitely going to need going forward, that often requires a lot of study outside of the lecture hours and lab hours. So I would ask yourself, do you need to do this? You probably do want to take biochem for a grade instead of self-study, just to get the actual benefits of the class. And for the MCAT, a lot of schools do like to see it. on the academic record, even if it's not a requirement. It's strongly recommended by almost every school. So I'm hesitant to say go for it on this one.
Well, and they're saying they want to do this to ease the load, but if you're self-studying for biochem, you're not easing the load. You're just gonna still be studying. So you might as well take the course. See if you can manage studying for the MCAT with that at the same time. Not taking it, it's a hard no for me. I've had students who tried who
Yeah.
tried to do it. It did not go well. Everyone's different. I understand that, but this is not necessarily going to ease the load for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My bigger concern with this is biochem and OChem 2 at the same time. Typically, they're sequential.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, I would check in with your chemistry department and say, is this smart to take biochem and OChem 2 at the same time? Or will I need my OChem knowledge to do well in biochem? That's the bigger concern for me.
Yep. Yeah. Good point. So
good luck, Christian.
Maybe not the best. Yeah, maybe not the best.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. It's quiet today.
It is.
I'm wondering if school has started for a lot of people, so they are kind of back in the thick of things during midday.
They need to be hanging out with us. That is the only answer.
I've heard we're very cool in person too.
Okay.
Much cooler in person than on YouTube. Angelica asks, just popped in, love your work. My question is, how do you guys recommend going through school with chronic health issues that sometimes inhibit you from schoolwork? Yeah. I don't know if any one of us specifically can talk about this, right? Because I went to med school but didn't go through with any kind of chronic health issue. Courtney, Verinia, you guys didn't go through med school. Courtney, did you have any students that had chronic health issues go through school when you were there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I had people with Crohn's
were obviously open
and
about
other
it.
things. Yep. And they would be okay with me sharing that. Yeah. So Crohn's, some arthritis, some mental health issues. I had a student that was in AA and was doing really, really well, but wanted to make sure that they were managing their stress level as they were going through that. So absolutely. In kind of working through undergrad as well, I've had family members that have needed accommodation, so I am familiar with that. I would say take advantage of resources and accommodations that your school offers. There can be things that would give you extra time, or they would be more understanding of absences or test taking time and things like that. So I would reach out to your school and see kind of what can be done on that front.
And being proactive about it. Don't wait until you're in the middle of, a situation with your health that now it's, almost insurmountable because you're so far behind. So definitely, as Courtney was just saying, research the accommodations that you can get. And you have to put your health front and center. Whatever it is that you need to do to be able to stay on top of that is really, really important. Don't put that second place. That should come first, so that you can manage everything else that's going on. It's doable. Just you have to be proactive and recognize what you need to be able to be successful and inquire about it at your school. Good luck.
Good luck. Yes, you are not the first. You're not the only. Rania, leadership in secondaries is a little vague. Any tips? I know what else is vague. This question. What do you mean by that? Leadership in secondaries. Rania, give us a specific prompt that you're potentially struggling with. That's the real struggle with secondaries, is they are so specific that you need to really watch out for each prompt. David asks, hey, MAPT team and MSHQ team, how important is volunteering, clinical and altruistic? I work full-time and can't afford to volunteer. Everything else, shadowing, clinical grades are outstanding. So, Brittany, this comes up all the time, this confusion around volunteer. I think most people use the term volunteer when what they really mean is clinical experience. And then we use community service for non-clinical volunteering. So help David out here, what we mean by volunteering and clinical and all that good stuff.
Sure. So yeah, there's a distinction between volunteering in the community and helping out in some form of community service versus clinical work that might be volunteered or volunteer work, or it might be paid. So it sounds like you have clinical experience, so it's not that you're lacking maybe clinical hours, but if you're worried about whether or not you've done enough to show that you are involved in the community in some way and volunteering to help out in your community in non-clinical settings, that's going to vary by school. Some schools really emphasize that. They want to see that on your application. So that's why it's so important to look and see, well, do my activities match what the school is looking for, understanding what their focus is. If that's not something that you've been able to focus on because of all these other things, that's okay, right? Just maybe, like I said, do some research, see what that school is more what they value, what they align with, and maybe that's not the right fit for you. Having said that, you can find opportunities, even if it's just a few hours a month, to help out in some way. That's not a clinical, if we're not talking clinical here, we're talking just helping out in my community. It doesn't have to be hundreds and hundreds of hours. If you're passionate about whatever it is in your community that you want to help out with, then you devote a few hours a week to that if you can. If not, you say it seems like you have clinical experience. I wouldn't stress it too much. Just research the school, find out if this is really aligned with what you are passionate about and what you've been able to do. And if it isn't, then perhaps look, at another program, at another school. That's how I would approach that.
Mhm.
And it's hard to balance all that. You do what you can.
Do what you can. Charbel. I'm working at a cryotherapy facility, taking blood pressure, making sure safe practice for patients, etc. Would medical schools consider it less valuable since there's kind of an alternative medicine treatment? Interesting. Courtney, cryotherapy, where athletes go in and freeze their bodies for supposed recovery purposes. Taking blood pressures, watching over people, making sure people are safe. Clinical? Not clinical?
I mean, I would say it sounds like the tasks that this person is doing are clinical. Hopefully I would say you want to make sure that the medical practice is under the jurisdiction of a practicing physician. But I would probably be a little bit lax on this and say, yes, it could be clinical. You will want to have other clinical in there, making sure that you actually have some contact with practicing physicians, since that is the program that you will be applying for and hoping to train to. So I would probably allow these hours to be counted, but would want to see additional. That's my take on it.
Okay. Samina, I am about to be 27 and start a pre-med post-bac. I'm super nervous because of my age and I am a woman. How do I manage this with immigrant mindset of also wanting to give back to my parents as well? Lots of things to juggle there, Brenia.
Yeah.
Right.
Lots.
Age, woman, and that immigrant mindset of I need to go and support my family as fast as possible, financially. Can Samina do it all, or does she have to give up on some of those expectations?
I don't think so. I think that obviously having this mindset of I'm 27 and I'm willing to now start a post-bac, even though, I don't know, someone out there says, oh, but it's too late now. The age is not an issue. I just want to assure you of that, Samina. We've had applicants in their 50s get into medical school right now. So that's not an issue. As far as that kind of immigrant mindset, I mean, that's a conversation that you have to have with yourself and with your parents, and understand, or at least help them understand, that there's some things that you just may not be able to do right now or right away because your time is going to be devoted to school. Hopefully they'll kind of understand that aspect of it, but it's just above all else, maintaining a sense of why you're doing this, and remembering that, whatever you've done throughout the years to get to this point in your life is going to come back to you 10 times, because you're putting in the work and you're putting in the effort, and just trying as best as possible with helping immigrant parents understand that things may not go according to what they were expecting, but here's why, like explain the reasons why, and just having that open conversation. They may not understand it ever, but you have to know yourself, you have to know why you're doing this, and keep that motivation in the front of your mind. Can you do it? Absolutely. We see it all the time. It's possible. Okay, good luck.
Well, and just keeping in mind that both gender and age are protected statuses and information that admissions panels cannot use to determine whether they are moving forward with an application or not. So you are completely protected under both of those. And also, I think also origin. So should be counted under about all of those.
Okay.
Good question. All right. Luis says, still haven't heard back from MD schools for interviews. Should I worry / reach out to schools that I'm interested in? Thank you all. Sounds about right, Courtney. This time of year is lots of freak out time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The general saying is silence but golden. For pre-med, silence is nightmare.
Yes.
Reaching out to schools, to me, like, don't bug them. You've applied. Right. They have your application. What are your thoughts for Louise to hopefully try to stay a little bit saner during this process?
Yeah, it truly is a hurry up and wait type situation where you don't necessarily know a school's process, how much vetting or evaluating they're doing on the front end, how many screeners they have, what their queue process is, if they're doing it in pools, if they're doing it in order of received or whatever. So all of that, I would say, is outside of your control as far as timing. So you just have to remain open, continue to be involved, try to relax and let this process kind of go. There are still going to be interviews for, a number of months still going forward, but I wouldn't reach out to schools just yet. I would check, your spam filter or your promotional filter. Sometimes I know my content would go there because I was sending it to like 50 people all at once. So make sure you're checking those, but beyond that, it really is just kind of living your life and continuing to build a solid foundation for if you get that call up and you're ready to go. So start practicing for interviews, start, making sure you're keeping a solid foundation, and that's really all you can do. Focus on your mental health and accept that this is part of the process that is outside of your control.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I know. We would get hundreds of emails during this time and call-ins and things like that. Just checking, just wanting to check. And we're like, okay, whenever we have an update, you'll be the first to know. We will reach out to you. So you do kind of just have to wait.
Yeah, it's a little early, I think, for letters of interest. That's something we usually advise for later on in the fall, early winter.
Yeah, and to me, a letter of interest, the more I've gone through this process, like your application is a letter of interest.
Yes.
A letter of intent post-interview
Mhm.
is something potentially that might help at some schools. But a
Yes.
letter of interest to me is like, hey, I'm interested in your school. I'm like, duh, you
I
applied to me.
know.
I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, whoa, why are you bothering me? Get away, kid. Get off my lawn.
Yeah.
I'm getting to that age.
Well, and if you want to keep things equitable across the board, you're going to review the same types of information for all of the candidates. And so it doesn't necessarily sway somebody one way or the other if it's just an update. I hope that you continue to do the anticipated hours that you've already put in your application, right? But it's not necessarily new information that will be used.
Yeah. Versus in the lawyerly world, I think they call it like material. Like if it's a material change in your application where you're like, I had 0 clinical experience and hey, school, I just want to let you know, I finally got that scribe job. I finally got that CNA job. And here's what I'm expecting to do. And that is a potential huge change in how someone may perceive your application. But if it's just like, hey, 10 more hours.
Yeah.
10 more than last week, like I told you last week. Like,
yeah. Our
no.
legal wording was new and substantial.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. Fran asks, if I graduate 2026, when should I take the MCAT without a gap year? Well, Fran, if only there were a tool where you could put in to that said tool when you theoretically would want to start medical school, and it would give you a timeline on everything that you need to know. Oh, wait. Brittany, is there a tool like that?
Dun, da, da, da. It's called Mapped. Check it out. Map.com. It will be a
lean to the
lifesaver.
side a little bit and put your hand up and say, this is how you spell it. No, the other way.
There you go. Yeah.
I almost get confused. There it is.
There
I
you
always
go.
get confused. There it is. Map
You're
right
no
behind
Vanna
me.
White. You're like, which
I'm
side
not.
is the letter
I don't know
on?
which way I'm facing.
I do that all the time because the camera's always flipped. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
wrong hand.
Well, there you go. Right here. Mapped.
There you go. MAPPD.com.
That's it.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah, this is super confusing and we need to work on our language and we're working on it. Mapped is like 99% free. Putting in your dates and timelines and getting all that stuff, tracking your courses, getting GPA, application-specific GPAs, building a school list, tracking your applications, all of that is free forever. The little ticker at the bottom, right? It says Mapped is free forever. Free forever. Get a trial of, right? That's super confusing. We need to change that language. There is a level of Mapped where it isn't free, and that includes being able to chat one-on-one with one of our advisors, right? If you want to chat with Verinia or Courtney or me or whoever's available in Map Chat, the chat advising feature inside of Mapped, you can do that. It's $90 a year. Super cheap for most people. And so that is the paid part of Mapped. There are other paid features as well. We call that Mapped Pro, but the rest of Mapped completely free. So it's very confusing for students to be like, hey, Mapped is free. Here's a promo code for a free trial. Wait a minute. Free trial for a free product. I don't get it. So we apologize for that confusion. Yeah, that's just, we're working on it. So Vernia, do you want to answer this question?
Oh yeah, sorry. So so check out Mapped. You can enter in all your information and you'll get a roadmap that will show you kind of ideally when you want to plan for these things. But if you're thinking graduating 2026 and you want to start medical school in summer of 2026, you really have to start planning to apply in 2025. So that would mean taking the MCAT early 2025, applying by May, June when the application opens in 2025. It's a 1-year process. So that's ideally when you want to target taking the MCAT early January, March, April of 2025.
Yep.
Which means that you have to structure your classes to have everything that you need done, not you're in those classes. They need to be done prior to you sitting for the MCAT. So you have to think a couple years in advance.
Yep. So here is our demo account. It was already set to the right med school start year. right? So Fran, if you're graduating in 2026, typically that means May, June of 2026, sometimes April 2026, and you want to start medical school without a gap year, that means you're starting kind of July, August of 2026. So that's why med school start year 2026, and then you have your little roadmap here, and we're going through a huge redesign shortly for Mapped, and so this will look different if you're going to go check it out in a little bit later. And so if we scroll down a little bit, you can start to see, hey, October 2024 to March 2025, I'm doing my MCAT prep. And ideally, this is all ideal time frame, you're taking the MCAT January 2025 to March 2025, a year and a half before you want to start medical school. So, Mapped. Go check it out. Salima asks, could you share insights on the significance of completing a bachelor's degree after a diploma for international students aspiring to get into medical school? What experiences could strengthen my application? Courtney, the dreaded I did my degree outside of the U.S. question that breaks my heart whenever I see it, because I'm like, oh, that stinks. Talk about how most med schools operate here in the U.S., what they're expecting.
I would say most like to see at least at minimum the prereqs completed within the U.S. For a grade of C or better. You can do an equivalency evaluation like through WES, or we call it WES, things like that. But a lot of schools don't look very favorably on international degrees just because they are often not the same. They're not sure, what material was covered at what standard, different crediting hours, things like that. So
different language, right? Can
this
you
is
learn
very
in the
tough.
English environment?
Yeah.
The typical rule that I see around is 90 hours. A lot of med schools want to see 90 hours of U.S. coursework, which is about equivalent to 3 years worth of work, if you're looking at it. There are a handful of schools that will do 30 hours. I was working with a student a couple of years ago who was in this similar situation. He was a U.S. citizen, but he went to England for college, and that kind of ruined things. Although where was I looking recently? There was some program out there that's like, we'll consider U.S., English, or Canadian undergrad. For most U.S. schools, Canadian undergrads are equivalent to U.S. So that I wouldn't consider international, but England typically is not. But there was this one program I was looking at that was like, oh, they consider England U.S. school. Cool. And so he was able to figure out there were like 5 or 6 schools that would accept 30 hours, I think is what he ended up having to take, and applied and got into at least one of them. So Salima, you got some work on your hands, at least to reach out to individual schools or go onto their websites and see what specifically they may require. But very likely you're going to have to do some work. I think, Courtney, I don't know if this is an accurate statement. It seems to me that DO schools are typically friendlier with that equivalency process of trying to go through that West program and using some international transcripts as degrees and credits.
Maybe
Do you know if there's any data behind that?
All.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. I think that there's maybe a couple of schools, but I wouldn't say it's the majority.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck, Salima. Thelzaya. Shadowing my primary care doctor. Would that also be considered clinical? I'm a little unsure where that would fit, or if it counts for both. So, Verinia, this student specifically says, "Hey, I'm shadowing my doctor. Would it count as clinical?"
Well, no, you're shadowing. So it's shadowing. Yes. Yes. So clinical is separate and away from shadowing. Where shadowing, you're observing a physician, their day to day. You're not actually working with the patient hands on or directly in some way. You're just observing. You're watching what the doctor is doing, learning. Clinical experiences where you actually have more direct involvement with the patient, hands-on care in some way, providing comfort, snacks, whatever it might be, that in a setting where you are directly impacting their health in some way. It doesn't matter where it is, doesn't have to be in a hospital, doesn't have to be in a clinic, it can be in a nursing home, it could be in hospice, but you are directly involved with that patient in some way and able to impact their health in some way. So that is separate and away from shadowing, where you're observing. That is the main difference.
Yep.
It doesn't count for both. Now, some shadowing opportunities have turned into more involved internship, let's say, or like almost like a medical assistant or even a medical assistant role. So if you get very close to this physician and they like you and they really can train you and they're comfortable having you talk to patients, room patients, provide, check vitals, that kind of thing, then it becomes a clinical job, and that's, or at least a clinical position, and that's different. But if you're strictly just observing and shadowing, then no, it's not. It's separate.
Yes.
Yep.
Garrison asks, I plan on graduating early in undergrad, or either 3 years or 3.5 years if I travel abroad. Does graduating early, even if it's just one semester, offer any benefits for entering medical school? Courtney, I'll also include the flip side. May it include some negatives as well, potential negatives.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can't think of any positives. Hopefully you're not planning on taking any coursework abroad unless it's housed under your main institution as well. Some schools do like to see travel abroad, just to give you a broader view of civilization in totality, but I can't think of any benefits. You'll want to make sure that you're taking all of the coursework that you need, that you're really understanding all of the material and actually retaining all of that material, because you're going to need it for the MCAT. You're going to need it for med school. We've said it a lot. This is not something where you can just cram for a test and then just kind of move along. You definitely don't want to do that. And if you're graduating early, I mean, when do you plan on applying for med school? What difference is it going to make there?
Yeah.
There's a lot of unknowns still for me to, again, say this isn't necessarily good or bad.
Yeah.
I don't see any clear benefits.
Yeah. Other than a little bit less tuition or a lot less tuition.
Yeah, potentially.
Sayuj asks, have my first interview in a week. Congrats. Any advice on how to approach group interviews? The group interview comes up a lot, Verinia. You answered this one relatively recently. I remember the words coming out of your mouth. What's your recommendation for group interviews?
Sure. So group interviews are an opportunity for you to showcase how you can communicate with others and more importantly, listen to what everyone else is saying. I think our general advice is don't be the sheep where you're not even vocalizing and no one knows you're there, but you also don't want to be the alpha where you're just kind of taking over the conversation and just talking over everyone. Depending on, they might ask you one question, ask somebody else a different question, or they might ask everyone the same question. Just pay attention to what everyone else is saying so that you're not kind of just repeating the same thing that they're saying. You may want to agree with someone with what they're saying, or say something like, well, yeah, that's one point, and I also think of this situation, blah, 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 where you're giving a different opinion. But at the end of the day, it's really an opportunity for you to show how you communicate, how well you can communicate in a group, while not talking over everyone or just kind of hiding out in the corner either. So good luck.
Yeah.
I know it's nerve-wracking.
I do these at the start of my application academy sessions when we're practicing mock interviews. That's how I kick off the hour. Is I will put out a prompt and I'll tell them either every other person has to be in opposition or you have to say something new and see how they interact. Is somebody kind of playing moderator when they have not been assigned as moderator, or not allowing other people to talk, or are people just kind of really sitting in the back and not saying anything? So this is a nice opportunity if you get a good group of students who are all there and want to have discussion. It can be really great. It can also be something where no one wants to be the first to talk, or somebody's just wanting to talk the most and really dominate. So there are kind of strategies to kind of insert yourself politely into that conversation, or if you notice somebody else hasn't had a chance to talk and one person is really over talking, right, kind of saying, I just want to make sure such and such gets the opportunity to share if they want to, right? But otherwise it truly is just a discussion, and it can reduce a lot of the stress of having to carry the whole conversation by yourself. So they could be fun.
Yeah. Could be. And you can also do some mock interviews with us. And we have a big sale going on medicalschoolhq.net/advising. Go check that out. Fran, how do you start a conversation with med schools to build relationships? Well, you come to MaptCon, obviously, where there are many medical schools that are going to be there, both DO and MD schools, that want to talk to you. They are spending money. They're taking time to come fly out or drive to Baltimore to come see you, to come talk to you. So that's the very easiest way, because they're there. They're expecting that conversation. Courtney, anything above and beyond going to MaptCon? Is it just like, hello, med school, I would like to start a relationship with you. How can I have a conversation?
Honestly, it's attending events, right? If they have open houses, if they are at a health fair or MaptCon, things like that, that's the best and easiest way to do that, because that is the time that they have set aside. And usually, yes, it does cost money. I had a budget that I would spend on going out, trying to recruit students, talking to students, attending health fairs, supporting the school systems that we were accepting students from, and things like that. So that is actually the best time to start that conversation, because you are there in person, building rapport and getting to know somebody, and actually having some set aside face time, as opposed to just an email that goes into a spam box. So those are the best time, are those set aside events like that. Because we get a lot of contact a lot of the time. And sometimes, if we're in an active cycle, like right now when applications are open, there's only so much we can tell you. If you're emailing us, we're not going to lay it out, everything that we want you to put in an application, because people can still edit their applications. It would not be fair. And so it's more so in, if you have an application in, maybe you haven't heard, or maybe you have an upcoming interview. You go to MaptCon, you see that school there, you talk about how excited you are to be there for the interview day, and then that brings you top of mind, right? And so it's not unfair. You're your best advocate, right? And there's a lot of risk associated when you don't know somebody and you are hoping that they are being accurate in everything that they attested to, and you only get about 20 minutes, 30 minutes with somebody in which to conduct an interview. Whereas if you attend an in-person event that they are there for, and I know deans and directors are going to be there, we have invited them because we know them, and they are there to talk to students, right? We are playing matchmaker here at MaptCon. And so that is the best way to start that conversation and build a relationship. Even if you're a couple years out, start building it. Or if you're right in the middle of an open cycle where you have an application in, best to do that now. It may result in an an interview offer or being moved on a wait list, things like that. So yep, that's how it's done. That's how you get out of the pool of 50,000, right? I mean, there's just so many every year. So yep, I would say it's very cut and dry. That's the way to do it. I admitted students that I met at health fairs. I admitted others that I didn't, but there's always that little bit of a risk or a gamble associated with it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's easier. It's easier. You
It's
have that
much
connection.
easier.
Yeah.
Much easier. Yeah.
Before we jump to the next question, let's give away some MapCon tickets. If you would love to go to MapCon, if you can make it to Baltimore, October 6th through 8th, you don't have to be there every day. The 6th is the biggest day. It's all day. Saturday, October 6th. Friday is the evening, starting at 6 o'clock at night for a couple hours. And then Sunday starts in the morning and goes until early afternoon. We have workshops, hands-on workshops. We have sim dummies from the Army that are going to be there. We have suture workshops and splinting workshops and CPR workshops and tons of amazing sessions put on by deans and directors of admissions at medical schools and PA schools and so much more. Oh, my. You should come, as Courtney just mentioned. You can come hang out, save 50% off your tickets using the code office hours. Leave a comment right now why you would love to come to MapCon. We'll show a couple on the screen, pick out some of our favorite ones, and get some free tickets out there. So go do that, and we'll check back in a couple minutes. All right, next question. Zaid. What resources, textbooks, and or courses would you best recommend to prepare for the MCAT? I graduate in 2026 and I'm planning on taking it next year. Sounds like you're trying to take it too early, potentially, maybe end of 2024. If you're going to take it next year, but the end of next year. There's a good podcast I do with our good friends at Blueprint MCAT called the MCAT Podcast. We're partners with Blueprint MCAT, so that's where a lot of the awesome stuff comes from Blueprint. They have an amazing free account that you can go create today to get access to a half-length diagnostic, a free full-length exam, as well as their awesome study planner tool that I think most pre-med students use on their study plan. So go check that out at blueprintmcat.com. As the ticker's showing below, we have the MCAT podcast. We also have an MCAT Cars podcast that I no longer do, but it's still available. Start there. And then most students, I think the data still holds. It's been a couple of years since I looked. Most students don't take any formal courses or anything, but obviously there are a lot of courses out there. Blueprint has a couple different variations of a course. Obviously, lots of other companies out there have courses. But at the bare minimum, the AAMC has materials that you should use, including their full-length exams. PJ, would being a medical interpreter for a physical therapist be considered clinical experience? Another, is it clinical, Verinia?
This is a tough one. I don't know that I consider being a medical interpreter as clinical, though.
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
It's different, right? Because it's a lot of talking, not a lot of hands-on, but you're interacting with that patient and being a middle person between the doctor and the patient.
Okay, good point. But it's a physical therapist.
Yeah.
So that's where it kind of gets a little hazy. So a physical therapist is not the same as a physician. So the interactions are different. The care that's being provided is a little different. So I would say, of course, it's valuable for you just to be able to see and observe and learn. But in terms of counting it as clinical experience for medical school, it shouldn't be your only exposure to working with patients, basically. So it's I don't want to dissuade you from doing this because I think it's important to do different things and learn from them. But if you're going to apply to medical school, make sure that you're exploring and observing a physician interaction in some way. So I would not consider this clinical experience, or at least not enough clinical experience to be able to say, sure, yeah, you can apply with just this as your experience. So medical interpreting at a at a hospital, at a clinic where you're with physicians, sure. Physical therapist, probably not.
Yep. All right. Maya asks, is it cliche or frowned upon to talk about race and the lack of representation of your race in physicians, especially in the wake of the affirmative action overturning? So it's interesting, Courtney. The AAMC included a different essay on the application this year on AMCAS. They got rid of the disadvantaged essay, replaced it with other impactful experiences. I think we've heard from people in the know that was in preparation of affirmative action being overturned.
Right.
Is that a good place to potentially talk about these things that Maya is talking about here?
Sure. You can still absolutely talk about it. I wouldn't say it's cliche to talk about it. And if it has been something that's impacted, what you've had access to, your preparation, any barriers that you've faced or things like that, that's pertinent information. So it's not cliche or frowned upon. I would love to have that information as somebody who's evaluating, to know what kind of context you had to move through your education and your life up to this point. So yeah, absolutely. And we, as med schools, either in the secondary or AAMC or a COMES and things, they provide places for you to be able to share that information with us. So hopefully all of the medical schools, even though affirmative action has been overturned, are still keeping this type of information in mind as they are kind of looking through students. It may not be as overt, but it is still protected under the guise of discriminatory actions. So there is still some protection there, and I don't see this being a problem at all to talk about. I would say be careful of the tone you talk about it. You can definitely talk about challenges and barriers and be honest, but there is a way to approach it where it doesn't come across as bitter or accusatory or kind of without hope. We want it to be somewhat inspirational or hopeful in nature, to where you want to make a positive impact in the future, and it's not just, I've had to suffer this whole time. And I'm not trying to come across as hardened towards this. I'm genuinely trying to be helpful here, but when you talk about it in such a negative way, it doesn't maybe promote the same type of desire to advocate for somebody as somebody who's talking about it. Yes, I had these barriers and challenges and it was difficult, but here's what I learned and here's what I hope to carry forward and be able to make better in the future by bringing my lived experience and sharing it with others. So I think that's more the way to pose it and kind of talk about it that will help them want to help and advocate for you as well. So be careful of the tone. Be careful of sharing too much information. I would say make sure that it's all pertinent information and it's not necessarily just a complete overshare of information. Sometimes this will happen in situations sometimes of abuse or really hard home lives and things like that. There may be a balance of kind of the level of detail you share and how you go about sharing, understanding that it may be triggering for others, or they may not need to know quite that amount of detail. So happy to help in this regard, but as far as race and representation, you still have that opportunity. I would take advantage of it, especially if it affected. your
Yeah,
education.
and I think that's the key part, right? Is you talked about the lived experience. It would be
Mm-hmm.
super cliche to just go, I'm Black, we need more Black physicians, period, without any of that lived
Mm-hmm.
experience of what a lack of Black physicians meant to you, to your
Mm-hmm.
community, to your family. And I think that's a big part that goes missing when talking about diversity, talking about race, talking about people's ethnicities, whatever it is they just lean on it almost like a crutch of like, well, I'm Black, so they should think of me as Black, and that is good enough. When in reality, what you really need to do is talk about those lived experiences. And in
Mm-hmm.
the wake of affirmative action being overturned, that is exactly what you have to do, because you can't
Mm-hmm.
just lean on that checkbox anymore. Schools can't use just race as an admissions criteria. They can use your lived experiences because of your race and how you write about those things in this
Mm-hmm.
other impactful experiences essay or anywhere else it comes up as part of the admissions decision. So it's still very much, race is still very much a part of an application, but it's now more on you, the student, to tell those stories, to talk about those lived experiences, and in this case, what potentially it may mean because of that lack of representation and what you want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Good question, Maya. All right. Reptile Maniac. Super blessed to have received 4 interview invites already. Congratulations. With average or maybe slightly below average interview skills, is there such thing as a number of invites which I can feel safe? Oh, so Verenia, here, I think Reptile Maniac is making a very common mistake
Mhm.
that I think a lot of students make, which is interviews will prepare me for interviews.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, practice is what prepares you for interviews, right?
Exactly.
And I've been reworking my interview book, kind of going through it and working on things that I want to kind of tweak in terms of language and other stuff, updating.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I reread that I wrote about that I is super pertinent to this is a lot of students will try to play a game of like, well, I'm going to use a school that's lower on my list and try to interview at them first, and that's going to help me prepare for a school that's higher up on my list. Well, number one, you may completely flip your list once you're at the school or
Mhm.
talking to the school in the COVID world we live in,
Mm-hmm.
with virtual interviews, right? Your school list may change because of the interviews. And so
Mhm.
trying to play that game may not work. And then number two, you're not going to get feedback on your interview. And so all you have to lean on is your horrible subjective interpretation of how you did, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of students, most students, are horrible at subjectively judging how well they did on interview day. And that's where doing mock interviews with advisors, whether you're school advisor or private advisors like what we do day in and day out, that's what makes the difference, right? Because you're sitting there giving all your answers, and then you have an
Mhm.
expert going, okay, here's what
Mhm.
went right, here's what went wrong. I don't know what you think about this question.
100%. Exactly. How do you know that you're answering the question in a way that you're sharing the message that you want to share, or that, that you're addressing whatever it is that they're asking you in an appropriate way?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I don't know what the purpose of this question is, if like they feel safe, meaning that, oh, I got 4 interviews, so that's a good thing. I don't have to worry about practicing. This isn't in the bag yet. Don't assume that 4 interviews is going to mean you're going to get an acceptance everywhere, or even one. The interview is so, so important, because this is where they actually see who you are as a person, not just on paper. So if you go in there and you're, nervous, you can't get through a complete thought, you're repeating yourself or just giggling because you're so nervous, you have to practice that. You have to practice that. You have to research the school, understand why you're interested in applying there, all of that. Don't take any of it for granted, please. Practice, 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 whether that's with a friend, with us, whoever it is that can give you honest feedback as well. Okay?
There is a
That's
strategy to this.
yes. Yes.
I would not go in cold for this part. It's too important. You could do everything right for 4 or 5 years, get yourself to an interview and not be your best advocate, not put your best foot forward, and it has a tremendous effect on your future.
Yep.
So this is not something where it's a numbers game where you're like, I've got 4, I should be okay. No.
Right. Exactly.
No, because most schools are looking for the soft skills and presented in a way that is very similar. So if you bomb one, you'll probably bomb a lot of them. And this comment scares me. Don't do this.
Same.
Don't do this. You need to do mock interviews. You need to practice verbally delivering answers to questions and responses, different types from different categories. Like this is something that you can see tangible improvement on, but you definitely don't want to go into cold. I agree with Verenia.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about this.
Yeah. And the one comment, right, with average or maybe slightly below average interview skills, to me, this student's making an assumption that that's all they got, right? I can't improve them, which is categorically false for almost every student, right? We do mock interviews day in and day out. So I'm obviously biased in telling people you can improve your interview skills, but we see it day in and day out. Yeah. And so
absolutely,
whether you work with us, someone else, an advisor, we always recommend going to your advisor you're already paying for with your tuition on campus. Go practice. Maya, does Application Academy include access to mock interviews? If not, what's a good resource? So in Application Academy, our schedule is such that there are some office hours, we call them, that are dedicated to essay review. There are some office hours that are dedicated to interview prep. There are some office hour sessions that are dedicated to Q&A. We cover everything, A to Z, that you need help with your application. Now, it is in a group setting. That is the one difference between doing one-on-one mock interviews with one of our advisors versus doing a group interview session. Now, we've been doing interviews now for the last probably a month or two, pretty hardcore. And there's maybe 8 or 10 students in a group at a time, in office hours at a time, if that. So students get typically as much practice as they want. And my favorite thing with the group environment is you learn from listening to other people. You learn from their answers and learn like, oh, I never thought about it in that way. So,
well, and it also introduces kind of the added pressure of becoming comfortable talking in front of other people. So it helps with the group aspect. It helps for just general knowledge of the types of questions, how they're going to be posed, how to frame things in your response. So there are still a lot of benefits, even if it's not one-on-one. And just the frequency at which we offer them too. So
yeah, I have done a terrible job as a moderator today. I have completely lost track of time. We are over. Were there any submissions for potentially MappedCon tickets? Karen saying, being an extreme non-trad with no circle of fellow pre-meds around, I would love to have MappedCon, not only to meet other pre-meds, it's also to start building relationships with med schools. I'm diving headfirst into this whole journey, and I'm taking all opportunities I can. Karen, we would love to have you at MappedCon. Please, please, please reach out. info@mapped.com, INFO @mapped, MAPPD.com, and we'll get you a ticket to MappedCon. And bring a friend. We'll give you 2 tickets. Bring a friend. So, I would love to attend MappedCon 23 to connect with and learn from experienced and knowledgeable speakers, recruiters, and also to meet other pre-meds who have a similar dream. What about hanging out with us? Nobody wants to hang out with us. Whatever. All right, Samina, we would love to have you at MappedCon too. I mean, you can bring a friend. I feel like Oprah right now. You can bring a friend. You can bring a friend.
You get a ticket. You get a ticket.
Come on.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming hanging out at office hours. We will be here again next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, here on premed.tv. We look forward to seeing you all at MappedCon as well. Remember, use that promo code office hours for 50% off your ticket. Have a great week. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.